Right, in today's chat, I'm going to speak about why I believe the whole population needs to start going underground. Now, this is going to have a lot to do with ancient civilizations. It's going to have a lot to do with modernizing civilizations since, I don't know, maybe 5,000, 6,000, 700 years ago, maybe even 10,000 years ago, going up to that long. And because of what's been coming out recently, with regards to what's being found out about how we've been lied to about the narrative of the world, also in conjunction with what's going on in Ukraine. A very, 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 very important thing that I believe all the governments in the world need to start taking into consideration are to start either trying to fund or assist in the funding of bunkers and trying to eradicate above ground housing. It's a very extreme point of view, but let me elaborate. So, if you take into consideration the scriptures that have been written about, which a lot of westernized cultures will consider to be mythological, you cannot understate the mythological standing of why those stories were told in the ways that they were told. It's because that's all that those people in those times had access to in terms of storytelling to be able to write it down for the ages. Now, this can have a lot to do with, I don't know, the burning of the Great Library of Alexandria, where that was one of the biggest disservices ever to be done in human history, because we lost countless records that we are never going to get back, because humans are obnoxious, insecure assholes. Bottom line. And now this is why I believe it's so important to get this kind of information out and across. If you look at what great archaeologists, engineers, geologists, I can name a few, the likes of Randall Carlson, the likes of Robert Schoch, the likes of the late great Sir John Anthony West. They all were the pioneers of information that showed the story that we were told is completely not what we have been led to believe it actually is. The story that was told to us is that we were a primitive being and we came from nothing and we were hunter gatherers that basically used shitty tools to evolve above and beyond that of the likes of apes or any kind of mammalian brain, which is simply factually incorrect now because of the plethora of information, not only scientific research that has come out, but intuitive knowledge that human beings have because we're not stupid. And I think governments need to really start taking this into consideration because we're not stupid. If you look at the 7 great continents where you can measure, this is going into Graham Hancock's work as well now, where they measured the nanodiamond impacts that came from a meteorite impact or an asteroid impact that hit the North American shelf 12,600 years ago. You can't refute the information as much as these, I'm going to be kosher and say, children who are in charge of industries, and because reputation and money is riding on it, they simply don't want to hear it. But now it's time the story changes. If you look at the vitrification of stone, vitrification of mineral, it doesn't matter what the mineral composition is. You need heat that cannot just be created out of thin air to be able to melt in a blast pattern that kind of mineral composition into almost disintegration. You can't create it. And what you need to understand is that it's come from an impact that we can't preempt as a human civilization anymore. That is why, if you look across the board, go into any civilization that has bases that have come from a fundamental background of ancient cultures. Ayurveda, go into ancient Chinese, go into North American with the Native Americans, go into South America with the Latin Americans over there, the Mayans. They all have catastrophe stories that all say the same thing in their own way, because story is how human beings get information across, and it's how we absorb it and remember it the most. And because of that, it's quite a simple fact, really. If you understand, going into Chinese caves, going into the caves that they're finding in Turkey and Göbekli Tepe, where they have been purposefully buried. Let's go into Egypt, where the Egyptians knew to bury their treasures and their most treasured individuals under tons of sand. Go and look at what ancient cultures have done and draw your own conclusions. I'm not telling you this. I'm not asking you this. I'm stating and I'm giving you enough of a foundation to be able to go and draw your own conclusions. Really now. It's becoming so obnoxious that the people in the top, the governments, the politicians, they are siphoning money out of the pockets of the general population and manipulating negative or positive feedback loops that end up paying themselves the money. Bill Gates, Melinda Gates, that whole fucking foundation is the perfect example. How Bill Gates and the WHO, not even elected body, they are basically taking government money, government subsidies, government funds, and putting it back into their own businesses and trying to be philanthropic and saying that they're doing the world justice. Meanwhile, if you look at what Bill and Melinda and their foundation was responsible for the polio epidemic that happened in India, where they single-handedly eradicated a generation of young women, you will understand that it's nothing but narcissism and egotism to these assholes in charge. People need to start understanding how important it is to take their own knowledge, their own intuition, and their own finances and start doing them themselves. And people who are in charge in governments need to start understanding that a general critical mass is going to be reached where they won't be able to stop the general population once enough of this information gets out. And when enough of this information gets out, they're going to be the ones that are going to need to deal with it, and they are going to be the ones trying to claw at all angles to try and salvage any sort of reputation or financial gain, because that's all they care about. If you take what I'm saying now and you put it into a practical, pragmatic form of method of approach moving forward, try and do this when you're at home. See how you can build a bunker underneath the ground. See how you can try and create a replica of what ancient cultures did, where they buried their civilizations and cultures and created networks and tunnels and in cave systems across the board that prevented and protected them from cataclysmic events that actually saved the human civilization and enabled us to continue moving forward. It's not a question anymore. It's a statement and a fact. And any scientist that wants to try and refute this has something wrong in their brain. I don't care who you are, and I will come after you. I will come after you so hard you won't know what hit you. So let's put an end to this right now. There are three main, let's call them industry giants that are responsible for this manipulation. Big Pharma, Food Incorporated, and the financial industry. And once you understand how the politicians are in their back pockets because of funding, you realize very quickly that the world has fuck all to do with what they're actually talking about, and it has everything to do with money. That's why this war in Ukraine has been the biggest money laundering scheme to ever face the planet. Look at Lockheed Martin and the rest of the absolute warmongering giants that have profiteered almost into the multitudes of billions, if not trillions, over the courses of the conflicts that have happened in the world. That's all they care about. That's all they want to do. They want money, and they want it in their pockets now. Instant gratification. That's all they give a shit about. And at the end of the day, the sooner the human population realizes this, the better it's going to be for all of us. Because when we take the power back into our own hands, there is nothing that they can do to stop the critical mass happening. There is a simple picture that I can remember off the top of my head where you have a split. It was probably by the famous cartoonist Zapiro, who there was a whole bunch of the population that was bowing forward and bowing to a dictator cracking a whip, until one person stood up and started rejecting the cracking of the whip, and another person stood up, and then everyone stood up, and guess who started bowing down to the population? The dictator who was cracking the whip. Because let me tell you something, an unequivocal fact. If the armies of the world took control of the politicians instead of the politicians taking control of them, trust me, it would be a fundamentally different game. It would be fundamentally different. The politicians and governments use the army as their personal security. And the minute this all changes is the minute the entire ideology and resolution around what war is and why war is a thing will change. That's the critical mass that needs to happen. The sooner this happens, the sooner it is going to be better for the rest of the population. That's 10 minutes done. We'll continue this tomorrow.